To quote your once wonderful, fantastic, greatest announcer of all time, Gordon Soley, welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I am your host, Gordon Soley, and what a fantastic territory the state of Georgia brought to their fans, and we're going to take a good look at a certain time period of Georgia Championship Wrestling. We're going to go from 1980 through probably 84, 85, right around the, I wouldn't say end of it, because it did pick up after the Black Saturday, and it picked up after again when before Crockett had taken it over. But we're going to focus on some of the Jim Barnett years from 80 to, like I said, 85-ish, more so like 83 to late 84. There will be a little bit mixed in with some of the Mid-Atlantic guys. It was so difficult to track down who was where at what time period, because they all interchanged with each other from between, the state of Florida up to Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. They were back and forth between the Mid-Atlantic, Atlanta, and Florida. It was hard, and some of the feuds were the same and would carry on to different states, and it would bring that, to all those different people throughout the Mid-Atlantic territories. So if some of it may be some from Mid-Atlantic also mixed in there by accident, but it's really, no accident. It's all still the enjoyable, great feud that was happening also in Georgia. Starting off, we're going to look at probably one of the biggest icons to come out of the Georgia territory, and that's Wildfire Tommy Rich. Barnett was looking for a new guy to bring up, a young and upcoming guy, and contacted Jerry Jarrett in Memphis, and Tommy starting out down there with his first heavyweight championship tag team belt with Tojo Yamamoto. This is Tommy, real young Tommy in 1975. This was his first magazine cover, first time you see him on a cover with a championship belt as well, which was a good start for Tommy. It wouldn't be another 5-6 years until he became internationally known throughout the territories, but right now, early 75, he's a tag team champion. Here is a action ringside program from the Memphis territory. I always thought these were drawn by Jerry Lawler. I guess he didn't. I know he did the the Patriot cartoon in was it Wrestling Monthly in the 70s? But for some reason, I have a false memory, which we're going to discuss a lot of that in a minute. I have a false memory with Lawler making these programs, which were really cool. We're looking at the Bicentennial Kings, Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson, and they are defending the tag titles here against Tommy Rich and Bill Dundee, and they are the They are the challengers. They were once tag team holders, but Tommy is not on the cover of this one, but they will take the titles when he partners up with Tommy Gilbert, which was Eddie Gilbert's father. Right down here, Tommy Rich, they are the champions. These tag team titles changed weekly sometimes in Memphis. So this was from a card in, the 7th of June, I believe it was? The 27th of June. Okay, so the 27th, Rich and Gilbert are the tag team champions. They end up dropping them this night here to the Bicentennial Kings right here. Also, Paul Orndorff captures the I guess it was the AWA at this point. Was it AWA or NWA? NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship belt from Jerry Lawler. That title went from AWA to NWA, back to AWA again a few different times. A lot of changes happened with that belt. Anyway, Orndorff takes the title here, and this is June 7th's card. But I wanted to point out another name on the bottom of the Tommy Rich and Gilbert match against the Bicentennial Kings was on the underneath card. First match of the night is a young guy named King Sylvester Ritter at the very bottom. For those who don't know who Sylvester Ritter was, and that is a young junkyard dog here. Real early young shot of JYD before he was the JYD. You can see him at the wrestling trunks. Totally different look there. And here's a picture of Tommy Rich and Bill Dundee. They are tag team partners, but they are not the tag team champions in that event. But that's the earliest stuff that I have on Rich. So I didn't have a whole lot in the 70s with him. That's pretty much all. He didn't get any magazine love yet, except for that one copy of Wrestling News. And he's on a bunch of Lawler's ringside Action Ringside programs. Just wanted to see if I had something else here that I was missing, but these are super early ones. These are from '77. These can run you a lot of money. These are pretty cool programs in here. George Foreman there featured with Rocky Johnson, who Rocky was a sparring partner with Foreman, and also apparently good friends. They were also in the magazines together, but that's a shot that I've never seen before. Bad Leroy Brown makes his way through, looking like Andre the Giant here with the same in the city as the Andre the Giant cartoon they had. Also wrestling number 2 here. Actually, I forgot I was doing this widescreen. I could show a little bit more. Wrestling 2, who would become a huge part of Georgia Championship Wrestling that we're going to discuss in a minute. And yeah, that was all I got for Tommy Rich early on in Memphis before he would become the big name that he did. So here we go on March 1980. Tommy makes his first cover of a Stanley Weston magazine, and they're calling him the new king of Georgia wrestling. And here he is at the bottom, getting a smaller shot there. He would quickly become a fan favorite, teaming up with Tony Atlas. And I have several Ringsider programs, none unfortunately with Tommy on the cover. This was the only one, and this was where he was tag team partners with Tony Atlas, and he's the tag team championship belt on this early program of Ringsider. Those programs are pretty cool. Gatefold, sometimes 3 pages. I do have a good stack of those, but nothing else with Tommy on it. He would battle on with Baron von Raschke, and how Tommy Rich, he learned a lot from the Baron in a match. Here is a November 1980 issue Sports Review, Tommy Rich. Good looking shot of Tommy. You can see how the girls would dig him, and he had the look. He was an excellent wrestler. I mean, underrated as far as many aspects go. I thought the guy should have been a bigger star than he was. I don't know why he didn't go on to the WWF like all the other guys did. He certainly had every claim to. Tommy challenging Harley Race for the World Heavyweight Championship, and of course they were grooming Tommy early, and soon to be world champion. And this also got the early look at Hulk Hogan in the World Wrestling Federation. The largest, or the biggest, the fastest, I should say, selling magazine ever in London Publishing Company's history is this March of '81 issue of Tommy Rich on the cover. The Fans Can Go to Hell. This sold faster than anything else ever. It was never sold in the back issues, which was one of the few of that ever happened. There was always a bunch of leftover back issues for sale that went back and resold again. And this one never made it back for the resale. They couldn't keep them on the shelves fast enough. Everybody wanted this magazine, which makes it expensive and kind of rare today. Some people don't know what it is, and you can get away with finding one somewhere under $20. But someone who knows that it's in really good condition, that's why it's either rare or you can't find it, or very expensive if you do. Wildfire back on again for July 1981. He'll do whatever the fans tell him to do. Tommy again on the cover, making his triumphant return to Georgia. So like I was saying, they would go from town to state to different state here and there, crossing over to all the NWA territories. They would take off for a month, come back, take off for 3 weeks, come back, and run it like that. So it's hard to keep up with their schedule. They could be in Mid-Atlantic one night, down in Miami the next night. It could be up in Memphis the other night. It's just hard to keep track of. And whatever magazine chose to show them on the cover that month, he could be long gone from that territory. Former NWA World Champion, as you were reading on the cover of the magazine, how could he be former? Here he is with the belt. He lost it just that fast. Tommy beats Harley Race for the NWA World title and drops it back less than a week later. One thing they can never take away from him, he was the World NWA Champion at a time when it was well honored, well respected, and it was a huge, huge accomplishment to make that claim. Great looking shot of Tommy on the cover with his first World Championship, and he would go on to hold hundreds more throughout his career all over Georgia. He held every single title in Georgia, national, the TV national, the tag teams. Here's the rematch on October of 81 with handsome Harley Race. This was signed by both Tommy and Harley. Am I good enough to beat Harley again? Unfortunately, he would not get any more title victories for the NWA. Ken Patera now taking battle with Tommy. Man, you'll see he's just on every issue just about in 81. It's ridiculous. In 82. This is December of 81 when he's battling Ken Patera, PWI. Back when PWI had the cool match style, the covers where they still produced magazines with wrestlers on the cover rather than just posing. They're actually wrestling. I always liked those the best. Great looking magazine cover. Magnificent battle of the Golden Boys. The #1 challenger taking on the world champ Ric Flair. Both very similar looking. Both very similar looking in the ring when they're together. Sometimes it'd be difficult to tell who was who, especially when they were bleeding and that white blonde hair would turn soaked red. Two of your best bleeders in the business, without a doubt. Tommy Rich, 1981, voted most popular wrestler of the year. And of course, the Nature Boy is the wrestler of the year, March of 82's award issue, PWI. Here's some of their matches together. Tommy Rich taking on Flair in Sports Review, May of 1982. Rich would have a tremendous feud with the Masked Superstar. And here he is on the cover trying to take the mask off of Superstar. Also, Superfly Jimmy Snuka here with the United States belt. Good looking shot of the evil Superfly Snuka. He has some fantastic battles with Ricky Steamboat. I mean, whenever I can get my hands on something from Japan when they have the magazines featuring them, I'm all over it because it's in full color. They give you tremendous posters. Just absolutely loved heel Superfly. Here's your Georgia heavyweight champion, the spoiler. On the bottom here, Tommy gets the main page for Best of the Wrestler. And we'll talk a little bit about the spoiler. He was not on many magazine covers, and we're trying to base this video on magazine covers for the guys who were in Georgia, covering Georgia at that time. And that's where we really pinpoint it down. It's hard to get a lot of material just from Georgia. There was, 13 magazines on the stands, and heavily dominated was the WWF. So it was hard to compete with that, even though they were on the grandstand as well with, the national TV show. One of the most bloodiest battles in professional wrestling history, Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich, which led to some gallons of blood spilled throughout the Mid-Atlantic and the Atlanta territory. And here is just one of the several we're going to see of those two battling on the cover. Here is Tommy again, taking on Harley Race in July of 1982. And their battles would continue on. You could milk that out because everyone was thinking Tommy's going to get it back again. He's young, he's upcoming, he already did it once, and we could fill arenas just with that allure alone. And they certainly did. Tommy would challenge AWA champion Nick Bockwinkel for the title, but in the issue of April 1982, Nick Bockwinkel says Tommy Rich is too stupid to be a champion. Here he is getting abdominal stretched. Wrestling Superstars in 1982, and it's your chance to vote for wrestling's sexiest wrestler. And Tommy Rich was always at the forefront of those votes. Tommy and Steamboat take the cover, Mid-Atlantic icon and Georgia icon, August of 1982. Also Hacksaw Butch Reed, who was also in and out a lot of Georgia territory in between his Bill Watts run in Mid-South, taking on Ric Flair for the NWA championship belt. Also Piper talking here, who's also in the territory at that time in Georgia. Gorgeous Gino Hernandez gets a crack at Tommy Rich and the Georgia Heavyweight Championship, and Tommy Rich has the sleeper hold. Also Superfly here in a early matchup feud with Bob Backlund for the WWF title before he would turn face. Roddy Piper taking on Tommy Rich in October of 1982. Also a very bloody Andre the Giant at the hands of Killer Khan. Killer Khan was also another Georgia territory guy that moved through up to the WWF. Here's another shot. October 82, Wildfire taking on Buzz Sawyer, and the battles continue. I think this one also has a pull-out poster of him and Tony Atlas as the tag champs inside. So make sure all your posters are always attached to the issues that you guys get. A lot of times they'll sell them and no posters are there. That kind of sucks. You got to have the poster with everything. Too much bloodshed in Georgia. Tommy gets the full cover here. Is the end near for Tommy Rich? Nah, in so many words, yeah, possibly, yeah, but no, he still has a nice long career ahead, just probably not at the fame that he had hoped for, or the fortune, I should say. January of 1983, Sports Review, and it ripped up blood-soaked Tommy Rich, who could bleed like none other. I mean, so many TV studio matches that they were building angles for, Tommy would get soaked on TV. I mean, just looked like he was murdered. Memphis several times. Let's see. I mean, I have like 6 or 7 different TV spots where he did that. One was in, I can't remember. Was it another territory in Georgia? It was short-lived. I have some pictures of it here. We'll see them later on from a place called Miss Kitty's. And it was like an 84, 85 promotion, and he was gushing blood. Also, he had a big feud with Bam Bam Gordy, and were both blood-soaked in several matches in the not late, but like mid to early 84 time period. Tommy taking on Larry Zbyszko, January, this issue of Ringside Magazine. They would go battling back and forth for the Georgia titles as well. Another shot with Wildfire taking on Roddy Piper. Snookin' now had turned face, battling Captain Lou Albano. Your poster's Jerry Lawler. And another great-looking shot here of Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich. This is signed by Kevin Sullivan, not Tommy this time. And I probably won't get it because Kevin kind of took the whole space here, but you know, hey, I don't give a shit. This was cool because I remember not long, maybe 6 or 8 months before this, Kevin Sullivan comes out with this, you know, Satan is my manager. And I remember an interview on Georgia television. He says, you're pushing me, you're going to push the evil out of me, and you're not going to like when the evil comes. None of you know what the evil is that I have inside me, and you're about to see it. And then shortly after, bang, here he comes. No one predicted this, especially the state of Florida, which really drew for some people to go ballistic, church people going as, you know, particular people. Man, they want him off television. You know, they were wanting him banned from any building. I mean, they really wanted to kill Kevin Sullivan. May of 1983's Inside Wrestling, great bloody fucking match here, man. Oh God, too bad a lot of the footage from the Omni and whatnot aren't out there for all of us to see, because we're really missing out on some great stuff. You know, just some handheld one camera shoots. I mean, it's better than nothing, but man, you know, it's just too bad that none of that survived. Tommy Rich with the National Television Championship belt here. I believe this is the first time this is on a magazine. I don't recall seeing the TV title for Georgia on any magazine cover prior to this one. This is June of 1983, and also talking about the new sensation Tiger Mask with the World Wrestling Federation Junior Heavyweight Championship belt. Continuing on, their feuds, also selling quite a lot of magazines. Both these guys at this point, Tommy Rich, Ric Flair, now donning the cover of PWI once again together in July of 1983. Tommy Rich is the Burning Desire back. Here's a 8x10 of those two in one of their matches somewhere. Just thought it was a great shot. Again, just looking at the close-up of Tommy's face, and it's just a roadmap of blood, man. Continuing to battle back and forth with Larry Zbyszko, September 1983, Inside Wrestling. Solo cover of PWI. Now this is his second time on PWI, first time posing by himself, alone for one of the pose portrait covers, which would pretty much become the mainstay for PWI at this point. Wrestling World covering the Zbyszko battle with Tommy Rich in December 1983. Tommy makes a short run in the AWA and has it out with Bockwinkel and also his manager, Bobby Heenan. And here's a rare match of the manager / some part-time wrestler, Bobby Heenan, who was also a fantastic gusher with blood, man. I mean, he is on some of the most iconic covers in the early 70s that we've ever seen. And Bobby was another terrific bleeder. It all came down to this, the last battle of Atlanta. Two men had to go into a cell-type cage to settle their difference. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out. Full roof of mesh and steel, all four sides, and nobody gets out until the feud is done. And this was it, the last battle of Atlanta. Buzz Sawyer, the Mad Dog, and Tommy Rich. What a fantastic shot this is. Also, Austin Idol at the top taking on Stan Hansen. Austin Idol also in and out of the Georgia territory from 1980 on. Wrestled there a lot. Yeah, of course, he was more of a mainstay in the Memphis territory, but did a lot of battles in Georgia. Best of the Wrestler, we're looking at Flair and Rich once again in the sleeper hold. Moving up in the years now, we're getting into 1984 territory. Tommy Rich battling with the Road Warriors. I believe this was the Lawler match up in the North Jersey Meadowlands territory. I think, and this is when they first came to this territory for Pro Wrestling USA. They had a few. They had a few in Memphis. They had a few with Lawler and an Idol with the Warriors before he made the jump. It's tricky because they went, like I said, they interchanged with Memphis a lot, so it's hard to pinpoint that. Tommy Rich again, July of '84, on here with the Super Destroyer. Super Destroyer is on a couple of covers and usually not credited and usually miscredited as the Masked Superstar, who was his tag team partner, and both several-time national tag team champions were the Super D and Masked Superstar. Great tag team, big, rough, tough, brutal guys. I have the best of, a couple of their best of DVDs, and they're just some great matches with those guys. Tommy would go back to the hometown of Memphis after a several year absence from staying in the Georgia Mid-Atlantic territory, and now partnering up with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert and becoming the Fabulous Ones. And this is, if memory serves me correct, this is Jimmy Hart's version of the Fabulous Ones, or it's Jackie Fargo's. You know what? Let me say. It doesn't really say. There was two Fabulous Ones. Jackie Fargo had his kind. He was calling them the fake bleach blonde, and that long, drawn-out, horrible 20-minute promo that he cut about the Fabulous Ones and Jimmy Hart. I just can't remember which one was his team. But this was also a short-lived Fabs right here. They would also, they would get the Southern Tag Team Championships from Memphis. And they would soon split up, as you'll see on the next issue. Tommy is gushing blood. Another TV spot, like I said from him before. His mother came out and was trying to get Tommy to, change his ways and to relax. And you're taking things too hard. And then he gets attacked on TV. And then, I see a gushing blood on television. I'm sure that has to be on YouTube someplace. Martel taking on Nick Bockwinkel for the main page in December of '84. But a good short blood feud between Gilbert and Rich. Like I said, his father was the tag team partner. They were champions together, and Eddie and Tommy just couldn't keep it together. Wildfire, Tommy Rich in 1985, and this is a February issue of '85. So this will hit the newsstands around November of '84. So this is kind of like almost the beginning of the end for the Hot Tommy Rich on the magazines, man. They would drop him. Wrestling would change tremendously within the next several months. McMahon would bar all photographers from coming ringside, therefore they couldn't get any good photos, and the territories were splitting, closing, jumping ship, merging. It was a really rough time for not only the fans of the magazines, but the fans of wrestling in and of itself. Mr. Saito is in an arm lock with Wildfire on the cover of Wrestling World, June of '85, with a special, their '85 special issue, which was usually at the end. It's kind of like their annual. Here's a few photos I was telling you about Tommy from down in Miss Kitty's in Georgia. I don't really know the name of the show. Was it All Star Pro? Something like that. There is tapings of that floating around. But here he is against Bam Bam Gordy. A bloody mess. And another shot here. This is around, I can't remember. It was upper 80s, if not early 90, somewhere in that time period. But somewhere around 89, I'm going to just guess at this. Another great shot of him totally ripped up there with the blood and forehead. Good looking shot of both guys here. And you can just see the picket fence off to the corner, keeping the fans back. Relatively small place, and Tommy getting some heat back. And here's just a shot of him later on in the ECW as he took on Terry Funk in a match called The Night the Line Was Crossed 2. Not the match, the event was called Night the Line Was Crossed 2. And Tommy was soaked in that match too. He only had a couple of short matches in the ECW, well past his prime, retired by that point, but still came out, and the fans really appreciated him by, booing the shit out of him, which we're supposed to do. We really gave him shit. I mean, sometimes it was, pretty rough, calling him a fat fuck and all this shit. But he was a good sport about it, man. He was pretty cool and always got the fans pissed off. So that's all we ask for. This will be one of your last magazine covers with Tommy Rich on it. It's 1989. It's a super hard issue to find. The Gold Belt Wrestling poster book, and it is, like I said, hardly ever for sale. At least it was years ago. I don't know anymore. I really haven't looked, but it was a bitch to find one of these, and it took me forever to find one, and finally did, and for no other reason, just so I can make claim of the title of having every one of the Gold Belt issues. That's it. Nothing special about it, but it is your last look at Tommy Rich posing on the cover by himself. You don't see that, especially this late in the 80s. These kind of front covers didn't exist anymore. It was, 18 fucking guys' faces all in a collage of a mess, like a comic book, not knowing what was going on. So I kind of like it for that reason. Jumping over to his former tag team partner, Mr. USA, Tony Atlas. And, Tim, I have a program with him now, but I just said that. I have a program of him in Georgia when he won the Mr. USA competition, and he was jacked out of his head. I can't believe I forgot to bring it. I didn't even think of it. I was so focused on this stuff and the Legion of Doom stuff that I just totally slipped my mind. Here's an early look at Tony Atlas, his first magazine cover, where he's got a full spread on himself here, posing in 1980 at Wrestling News. Guys had asked me once before, actually, now that we're on the topic, and I always forget. These plastic bags for these Wrestling News issues, they are an 8x10 portrait photo bag. That's kind of what you need to type in to look for it on Amazon easily. So the size is 8x10. It holds it a little bit bigger than that, like a 16th on each end, but it fits your Wrestling News perfectly. And it's resealable on the back. You can see the resealable here. And they're not expensive. They're not very popular. People really don't use them for their photos. But Wrestling News was thin enough to where it's almost like a photo because there wasn't a lot of material in these magazines. But they cover your Wrestling News perfect if you didn't want to use, something that fits a little bit more secure than the 8.5 by 11 and a quarter size bags, or the regular size bags. Mr. USA again, back on the cover for his second issue, and once again on the cover of Wrestling News, now 1981, March's issue, which would have been released around December of 1980. Young shot of Mr. USA. Tony Atlas, the cost for going after the NWA title, looking at the date, it's Harley Race at this point, and they had a couple of huge matches that came out of Georgia, and also Flair came down when he was champion, challenged Atlas as well, which we'll see in another minute, but a great looking bloody face of Tony Atlas on that magazine cover. Gets a smaller corner shot here with Don Morocco, pre-WWF, and this is PWI May of 1981, and he also got a full pin up here of Mr. Wrestling 2 from Georgia, which is one of your first posters of Wrestling 2. Tony, of course, would move up to the WWF. He'd be back and forth between Atlanta and also the WWF. He'd make runs back and forth before making the WWF his mainstay in '84. But pressing Hulk Hogan over his head was always an awesome, iconic magazine cover for sure. Always enjoyed that cover. Here he is now challenging Flair for the NWA World Title fall of 1983. Him and Jesse Ventura, they would also meet in the AWA, they would meet in the WWF, and I was lucky enough to see them at the Spectrum in a cage in the WWF in 1982 during their feud, and Jesse was calling him Bony Tony Atlas. 1982 September, great looking cover and a test of strength for Atlas and Jesse. Wrestling World issue February of 1984. Atlas again, still in the WWF, and one more with the big man Tony Atlas, about to be Boston crabbed by Greg Valentine in the WWF. So you can see they got their early starts in the WWF, all except for Tommy Rich, which, you know, to me, I still think it's crazy. I can't believe he never really got too much of an opportunity there. And this brings us to the myth of the Legion of Doom. So if you were to look online and read who the Legion of Doom was, it's baffling how ridiculous the long list of people that they have as members of the Legion of Doom. The original Sheik, the Iron Sheik, Arn Anderson, Buzz Sawyer, Matt Bourne, King Kong Bundy. Oh my God, none of them were a member of the Legion of Doom. There was 4 members of the Legion of Doom, and 4 only. But you know, it's really nobody's fault. The TV was kind of confusing. There wasn't a lot of coverage, so there's a funny little thing that happens to us humans, and it's called the Mandela effect. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, for those who don't, the Mandela effect it's kind of where our memory clashes with our imagination, and it gets kind of mixed up into one. And gets mixed and gets, you know, confused, and we have what's called a false memory. For an example, you have, The Empire Strikes Back from Star Wars. Darth Vader would say, he did not say. This is the false memory. Luke, I am your father. That is incorrect, and many people think he said Luke. The correct reality version of that is no, I am your father. And for some reason, people imagine that or remember that as Luke being part of that, and it's not correct. People do that with names, add words, they do that to dates, they do that to different phrases, and they misremember what the reality is. And that seriously is what happened with the Legion of Doom. So let me explain who the members were. Okay, so before the Legion of Doom, in Georgia Championship Wrestling, Paul Ellering had a group of guys called Destruction Incorporated, and that consisted of Arn Anderson, the Iron Sheik, and Matt Bourne. Okay, this is in like early '83, say January. I might be off a month, but somewhere in that neighborhood. So as a threesome, they continue on. Bourne and Arn Anderson become the national tag team champions in Georgia. Skip a couple of months forward, and Paul brings in his newest crew to the family, and that is Animal and Hawk. Around this same time that he brought Animal and Hawk in, you can see the tension starting with Arn Anderson, and you can tell that he's kind of getting ready to turn face. The angle was on TV that Ellering wanted Arn to change his name from Arn Anderson to Arn Ellering and totally disassociate with his uncle or cousin or brother, whatever it was, of Ole. Ole comes on TV and he tries to talk some sense into him, and he says, you can't be doing this. This is your name. I know you went with Ellering, and this is wrong, but changing your name, this can't happen. And you kind of see the gears twisting in Arn's brain, and eventually so forth. The fans knew Arn was on his way out. So he was never a member of the Legion of Doom. Fast forward another month or so, Matt Bourne's out of the picture, and also the Iron Sheik is also out of the picture during this time. Now, we're not being told all this. This is just happening, and you're kind of like putting this all together because there's still no mention of the Legion of Doom yet. Okay. Now, Paul brings in his newest member on top of Animal and Hawk, which is King Kong Bundy. And Bundy was there for a split second, maybe a 2-week TV taping. He wasn't really an official member. What had happened was he was in the ring having a match. Paul's talking to Gordon on the side, narrating the match or what's going on, and he tells Gordon that he's not a member of us. This Bundy guy's 450 pounds. He's 6 foot whatever. I can't have my boys Animal and Hawk going up against a guy like that. So the best way to protect them from a guy like that is to bring him into my stable. And not knowing that he heard him say that from the TV studio to the ring, Bundy hears it, comes over and starts attacking Ellering, and that led into a feud between the Road Warriors and Bundy and the Masked Superstar, who would eventually take their tag team titles, the national titles, from them. Now he's stripped down to just two guys. It's Animal and Hawk. He brings in his next member, which is Jake the Snake Roberts. And Jake was the third member and now what is called to the Legion of Doom. So there's no more Destruction Incorporated. It was very close to Skandar Akbar's Destruction Incorporated. It is now the Legion of Doom, and we have three members. Shortly after that, we bring in the next member of the Spoiler, which would make the fourth member of the Legion of Doom. And that was it. This continued on for several months throughout the... I'm trying to think if it was like by the end of the summer, it was over. The Legion of Doom team lasted no more from, say, 5 months, 4 months at the most. Jake Roberts would have his last match as the national TV champion in July, and he would be gone. He would go on to battle Ronnie Garvin. The Spoiler would have his last match when he was the national heavyweight champion in July of '84. The Road Warriors, the same. They would lose the titles. I believe it was to Superstar and Bundy. I know they lost the titles to them, but if it was the last time, I'm not sure. But they went on. They left in July of '84, and in August, they were the AWA champions already. So it was a quick breakup and a quick spread out. The guys were all disbanded, and the Legion of Doom was no more. And to hear the original Sheik was a member of the Legion of Doom is not correct. The original Sheik came in '84 for one match at the Omni and 2 TV tapings, and he was managed by Paul Ellering, and there was no linking him with the Legion of Doom. So there it is. So let's take a look at a couple of the Legion of Doom early on, and I wanted to, I'll leave it where it's at. I'll get to it in a second. Here's your first magazine cover of Animal and Hawk, one half of the team, the Legion of Doom, and this is like their first magazine cover, their best magazine cover, the most sought-after magazine cover. Great look at them with the National Tag Team Championship belts. They would next be on this cover from the same photo shoot, and this is fall of '84's Wrestling by the Year, so Wrestling '84's fall issue, and again, another great shot at the Road Warriors for a tag team. Should they be banned, you decide. Another shot of PWI a few months later in September, again with the primitive makeup and not quite all the garb that they would take on later on. Now, I'm only showing magazines from Animal and Hawk during their Georgia time. So this is all during their Georgia period. Again, on the cover of Wrestling's Main Event, the past and present champions, and Animal and Hawk here with their National Heavyweight Championship belts. So much popular, so much so across the world, the Japanese put them front and center of their number one selling magazine at the time, Pro Wrestling Weekly. And it's kind of unheard of to have such a new team barely out for a year, destroying everybody and making the kind of waves that they did in Japan. The fans were screaming for them. Kind of like the Beatles movement for the wrestling in Japan, and they made a huge impact there. Here they are on their first cover. Here they are again on the first cover of Gong, another great thick issue, one of the best magazines on the market. Covers the real early Road Warriors, excellent, and this issue. Also, this one as well. Let's take a look at a couple of photos inside of these two early on as the national champions, and also the AWA Tag Team Champions. If I can get this all in there in one shot. Great looking pics of these dudes in full color. Everything the Japanese did, I can't say it enough because I love them to death. I mean, look what they gave you. I mean, it's just incredible action shots as well, but the photo shots, second to none. Like I said, Sports Illustrated quality of the Road Warriors, again with their national titles. Great looking pic again. Here they are in the streets of Manhattan, and they go through Times Square, all through the streets, hanging with the street people, filming vignettes for the AWA at this point, and also the different territories that they went into, like Southwest and so forth. Here they are in front of some of the adult nightclub, sex shops off 42nd Street, not too far from Madison Square Garden, and taking a stroll down in the city. I mean, look at this dude, man. He's just sitting there with his snakeskin boots in his left. They're like, who the fuck are these guys, man? Cool shot, man. Always love these pics. Like I said, us here in the United States got nothing. They even came close to this. Great looking shot again, coming off of Times Square. I think there's one more or two more. Yep, here they are in Central Park, taking the horse for a ride rather than the other way around. And I think there's one more before it goes to the black and white stories. Yeah, here they are coming out of the 49th Street station in Brooklyn and finishing their tour off in New York. It goes on to black and white stories again, and then this goes back again to full color again. More great photos of the Warriors. This issue here, tough one to find, exciting pro, and it's kind of expensive because it comes with huge posters. If you are paying over $200 for it, make sure all 3 posters are with it. Otherwise, you're getting ripped. I just wanted to show one other thing what the Japanese gave their people. Check this out. They would put their events on television. It wasn't like you had to go to the arena, which everyone wanted to, but it would be on TV, like a regular, football game that we get every Sunday. They would have it for free on television. And you can record it off your VHS and have the event. And what they gave their fans were artwork for your VHS. So if you cut this thing out across the dotted lines here, this is a VHS box. So, here's the back cover, here's the front cover, here's the side spine here, and here's also the labels for the side of the disc, for the tape. Pretty wild. And it also has here, these are for, they call them, this is your cassette, but this also fit for a VCD, which was a video compact disc. Those were out before DVD. They had movies on compact video disc. Some countries still sell them and still make them, like Singapore and Thailand. VCD is a very popular small compact DVD type programming. But pretty cool, right? Can you imagine getting that as like when you're 10 and 12 years old, you have your own VHS box cover? I mean, just awesome. The shit that they gave their fans was just unbelievable. And of course, every magazine is in all color with these guys. And if you're looking for VHS artwork, which I don't think many of you are, it's in this Invitation to the Ring issue in '84. Not kind of just about well established now in '84 in the AWA, but here's Animal in a rare cover by himself. Also, Hawk got a rare cover by himself, taking on Von Raschke, January of '85, and that's kind of where we kind of finish off with the Road Warriors, finishing up 1984 as the tag team of the year. And for those who for those of you who follow the Legion of Doom, here's a Jake Roberts match with Tommy Rich, and this is on March of '84's issue during the Legion of Doom time when he was a member. JYD gets the full cover. JYD also in and out of the territory of Georgia since 1980 as well. As JYD, not Sylvester King Ritter. Pro Wrestling USA Annual. It's also got Jake and Tommy on the front cover, spring of 1985. Jake sadly did not get many magazine covers at all. He was really snubbed, and I'm basically showing you every one where he has a little bit larger than normal size photo. This was probably, there's the bigger of the smalls. The other ones were like little 3x2, business card type photos, and that was it. He did not get many at all, which is a shame. Not until he came to the WCW and challenged Sting for the title January of '83. He got a little bit more love. His name was already established by then from the WWF, and already ran that course and moved on. And here he is in the WCW once again. Going back to the Legion of Doom time, he would, have some bloody battles with Ronnie Garvin for the Georgia television title, and as he left the territory, he would drop that title, and like I said, moved on in summer of '84. This is the Wrestler of August 1984. It's also got Buzz Sawyer. I believe, is this where he brings him to Florida? Yeah, he brings him to Florida with his brother. Kevin Sullivan's twisted at this point. Kevin Sullivan was a face and a heel, both in Georgia, and then back down to Florida with Eddie Graham again. Like I said, there was a constant turnaround in and out of the doors of each company at that time period. It's hard to pinpoint every one. Here's Ronnie Garvin with the National Heavyweight Championship belt. Only shot of the national title of that style on the TV, on the magazine cover, February of '83, with Valentine on the cover. And of course, Ronnie would go on to take the World Heavyweight Championship from Ric Flair in '87. And your final member of the Legion of Doom, which was the Spoiler, and here's an earlier shot of the Spoiler. Not many covers with the Spoiler, just a few, and nothing from Georgia except for this one where he would battle Mr. Wrestling 2. Mr. Wrestling 2, of course, needs no introduction from me, from the fans then in Georgia. The guy was, probably more popular and bigger than Tommy Rich. He did not get a lot of magazine love, though. I guess when it came to dollars and cents, Tommy Rich would outsell him, but the fans didn't have any less love or respect for Mr. Wrestling 2. That's for sure. He would take on Larry Zbyszko here in Georgia in October of 1983. Before Zbyszko would jump up to the AWA, he also had a huge battle with Terry Funk in the late 70s and early part of 1980. Funk would follow him into Georgia in 1980 and continue their feud from Texas into Georgia. And here's a shot of that on Wrestling's Greatest Battles. Mr. Wrestling 2, some say he won the NWA World title. He should be the champion, somehow got screwed over and was not the champion. It led to a lot of pissed off fans, and their letters and cards flooded the TBS studio, as well as Stanley Weston's London Publishing Company, of why Mr. Wrestling should have been champion. Fans, were very caught up in the moment and pissed off that he didn't get the title. So much so that they had to create a championship specifically designed and awarded to Mr. Wrestling 2, called the Champion of Champions title. And it was a trophy belt rather than a belt. And here he is on the cover. To my knowledge, I don't know how many other champions there were. This is a defended cup, kind of like the Crockett Cup, but not every year. This would go on every time he had a challenge, and the winner would get that trophy. And he was given that on Georgia TV. If I can get this to stay open for you. Here he is getting presented that award on Georgia television, the iconic logo with the powder blue and white on behind him, which you can't see, it's not in color. But this goes on to explain how he was robbed from Harley, and the fans demanded something to be done, and now they made him the champion of champions. And it's all discussed in this early PWI issue in September 1980. Many people had no clue about that, myself included, if it wasn't for the magazines. So it's great little things like that preserve the history, and that's why it's so important that we rescue these magazines from extinction. The whole reason for this channel that continues to go today is to just try to inspire somebody to go out and just buy one. Just buy one of your favorite ones for $10. Just grab it, and you never know. You might get the itch to get a couple of more, and then you have a collection of 5, and then it stays with you forever, and then it gets handed down to whoever, and wrestling is still somewhat safe. It's up to people like us to keep the good name of professional wrestling, the sport of wrestling, alive as we've seen it through the magazines back in the day. He would go on to battle Mr. Olympia, and that would take place in Mid-South as well as Georgia. That is Mr. Wrestling 2. This is summer of '84. Mr. Wrestling 2 would also battle himself, Mr. Wrestling 2, the Imposter, and that's covering the feud of the Imposter, Mr. Wrestling 2, April of 1980. His original start into wrestling was from a tag team partner from Mr. Wrestling 1. And here's Mr. Wrestling 1 on the cover with Ole Anderson. And they were tag team champions. They were national tag team champions. And that's what got Wrestling to his start. Mr. Wrestling was maybe on 3. And they were like Wrestling Monthly and Wrestling Guide or something else. He was on nothing. hardly covered at all, and it's a shame for a fantastic talk about another icon in the Omni. Mr. Wrestling was it, and probably more so one time in the 70s than Mr. Wrestling 2. But yeah, not a lot about Mr. Wrestling 1. So, as rumored, the Legion of Doom was the Sawyer, Buzz Sawyer, and like I said, he was not ever. When he turned good and left Paul Ellering's crew, he went back with his brother and turned face, and it's Brett Wayne Sawyer and Buzz here, the National Tag Team Champions of Georgia. Also, Abdullah the Butcher, who made several runs in Georgia, as well as Dusty Rhodes. Both battled in Georgia together, but this is a match from the Sunshine State in Florida, February '84, with Dusty getting the object into the bloody eye. Brett Wayne again on the cover, and this might just be your last one with Brett, and taking on Hawk in a tag team match, and a good looking shot of both these guys when they were real young in Georgia. Buzz would continue to get a couple of magazine covers, but never a big spread for himself, usually as the heel and usually as the guy who's busted wide open. Here he is in Florida with Mike Graham. Here he is now again with Abdullah the Butcher in the March issue of Wrestling Scene. How his brother is taming the Mad Dog, and he's not liking it. He wants to go back to being the Maniac himself. He would take on Joe LeDuc, and he would be here as a bounty, the challenge, and take on Sawyer here, and move on to the WWF really, really shortly. Maybe a couple of appearances, and he was out the door just as fast as the Freebirds were in their short run. And finally, King Kong Bundy, who was rumored, like I said, Destruction Incorporated, not Legion of Doom. King Kong Bundy, for as big of a name as he was not on many magazine covers whatsoever. And we're going to look at just a handful of them. Here he is on All Stars Wrestling, Heroes and Villains issue in 1986. Once again on the Main Event Wrestling on February 1986. This is all 86 time for the WrestleMania plugs for him. He's well gone from Georgia at this point, July 86. And then again, on Mania 2, of course, they had to steal their shots. No cameras were allowed. The photographers were booted. McMahon wanted the rights to every photo, every wrestler, every name. You'll be sued if you're caught. So now they had to steal their shots or pay fans for close-up shots as best they could get them from ringside seats, which was the only people who suffered from that was us, the fans. Well, I mean, also the companies. They had other territories to take pictures from, but your WWF shots became pretty hard to get. And here is the shot from the ever dreadful main event of Mania 2. The whole Mania 2 was a disaster. Taking a look now at the Fabulous Freebirds, the first team that claims to walk out to music. The first team to be a triple, as more than just two. One of my favorite tag teams for sure. Always enjoyed the Freebirds. My stories with them are spread out through a bunch of all of our other videos that I've done here, and you guys know how much I like the Birds. Here they are as the National Tag Team Champions on the cover of PWI, February 1981. We're going to see a couple shots of those guys with the national belts. Here they are again on Sports Review, and this is my autographed issue that I just kind of dug out of the cave just a couple of months ago before the filming of the video 100. August of 1981, signed by all three Freebirds with the championship belts, the national titles. Once again with the national titles now, and now they were defending it. Any member of the Freebirds could defend the title, even though only two of them were champions. They had like the Freebird rule, and they kind of started that as well. A lot of trend setting, the Freebirds are started there. Also, Mass Superstar taking on Mr. Wrestling 2 in Georgia as well. Mass Superstar was a huge part of Georgia, and we're going to discuss a little bit of him in a minute. The Birds again on their Wrestling All-Stars cover. This was the equivalent to, this was, Wrestling Scene's attempt at PWI's issue magazine, a little more cleaner, crisper, having more guys posed on it rather than bloody shut covers like they do for Ringside and Scene. And that was their shot on All-Stars. Wrestling 84 also has a great shot of them in, I believe, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking against Texas. At one time, I thought it may have been the AWA event that they had in the field, but no, that's not it. I think this is from Texas. Freebirds now moved on from from Georgia, but they're bringing the musk and this all of the essence of Georgia with them, with Bad Street USA from Atlanta, GA, and their video that they put out and all over their shirts all the time. Georgia was their main stay, their main place, and they carried that everywhere they went from that point on. And this is their first tour in Japan in a tag team tournament called the Giant Series 1984. Bam Bam would take on the Von Erichs in Texas. They had, their history is well written. You guys know all about what the Birds did and the Freebirds, how they battled the Von Erichs over the years. That's just Bam Bam getting a title shot against Flair. This is also Terry Gordy getting his shot. Michael Hayes getting his shot against Flair, and Gordy here also with Flair at the bottom. So they're both talking about their title shots and how they want to kill Flair. Kerry Von Erich is in a headlock from P.S. Hayes in February of 1985. And to the AWA, they had left the WWF, and like I said, they were there, I think, one taping in Canada, which got them 2 or 3 TV appearances, one from Allentown, and then they were gone, man. One from the Spectrum. They were there as faces. They came walking out with Cyndi Lauper and Tave Wolf. I can't say it wasn't working because they never really gave it enough time to let it work. They were just getting exposed, and then they were bounced out. I mean, you hear the different rumors. He didn't get along with Andre the Giant. Andre wanted them out, so they did. I don't know. It's probably half true, half bullshit. I mean, if McMahon wanted them and he's seen something in them, it doesn't matter what Andre said, they would have still stayed there. But for whatever reasons, they took off, and good for them. The Birds on the cover of the new style of Wrestling News, Wrestling Review, and Wrestling Rings. It just became one magazine called Wrestling, and it would last 5 more issues. 123 would be the final, and it would end completely after a long run from 1968. Freebirds challenging the Road Warriors in the Northeast for the joint venture of Pro Wrestling USA, NWA, AWA, teaming up to take on McMahon's territory in the Northeast. And there's a rare program of them going for the gold in the Meadowlands, July 19th, 1985. And good old Baron still kicking on the back. And here is Bam Bam getting slammed from that match in the Meadowlands. Road Warriors are rumbling with the Freebirds, November of 1985. And this was the match from the AWA. What was it? Super Clash? One of the Super Clashes, I believe it was, in the ballpark, taking on the Road Warriors where their faces were painted up. And that leads us to the rowdy one, Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper, started in Los Angeles, in Portland, making his rounds into the WWF back when Backlund was champion in like 79 for a match or two. Then to Georgia and the Carolinas, and that's where he would remain, bouncing back and forth for the next 3-4 years or so. And here he is taking on Wildfire Tommy Rich in a headlock, in a sleeper hold. Also Butch Reed, who was also coming into the territory at that time between Mid-South. The feud between Piper and Tommy Rich would continue on, and it's how will Piper and Rich feud destroy Georgia? And this is August 1982. Piper in the kilt and bagpipes, June of 1983. Down here on the bottom, Roddy would challenge the Masked Superstar for the national title, and these two would go back and forth in a small feud as well. This is from the Carolinas. This is a United States title when he went back and forth with Greg Valentine. Still just a rare shot of the rowdy one on the cover with a championship belt. Piper would go back and forth and feud with the Nature Boy Ric Flair, and that would be both Georgia and, of course, predominantly the Crockett territory. Dusty Rhodes coming in and taking on Roddy Piper. So you can see, he's taking on the NWA's champions Flair. He takes on, Dusty Rhodes, the former champion, before he got to Hulk Hogan. So he's already had some national exposure. He's also, not as big, but he was getting big. And it wasn't until he became a mega superstar in 1985 with WrestleMania. I still think Piper should have won one of those matches. If anything, the war to settle the score on MTV, he should have won the title there, and Hogan won the title back rather than making a tag team. But, you know, I guess they felt the need to be Mr. T to make Mania happen, and that's absolutely the truth. If it wasn't for Mr. T, that wouldn't have took off the way it did. Piper taking on Steamboat, yet again another future world heavyweight champion. Piper in there mixing it up with all of them, and then of course the former world champion from 1973 and 4, Jack Briscoe, in the Mid-Atlantic territory, battling for the Mid-Atlantic belt. Piper gets his own PWI cover, August of '83, all pre-WWF. Taking a look at the Masked Superstar. And this brings us to our Mandela effect, number 2. But this one, you get a little more of a break on it than your average. His real name is not the Masked Superstar. He is the Superstar. Incorrectly identified as the Masked Superstar. That was given to him by the magazines, and it wasn't by him. Whenever you watch any old Georgia Championship Wrestling, Gordon Solie, they didn't have ring announcers then. So, you know, the announcer at the table announced the wrestler's name. He was always the Superstar. I can never think of a time where Gordon calls him the Masked Superstar ever. Even the wrestlers, when they're talking about him and their matches that are coming up that night in the Omni or wherever it might be, they're calling him the Superstar. So I had to ask him this when I met him. And he said, that's a great question, a very interesting question that I've never been asked before. And I was like, damn, no shit. I says, you know, how come it's the Superstar, and then when you sign your autographs, you don't sign it Masked Superstar, you sign only Superstar? I said, so which one is it? He says, the magazines kind of gave me that name, and it wasn't until Paul Bosch in Houston that around late '83, '84 or so was mentioning him as the Masked Superstar, a la the magazines did. And then when he came to the WWF, McMahon had him there as the Masked Superstar. So his original name is Superstar, and that is his real name. He never changed it, and it was everybody else that just called him the Masked Superstar, and it's not his name. So how about that one? This is him on the cover of the WWF program, challenging Backlund for one of his last title defenses in Madison Square Garden. Also Superfly Snuka and Don Morocco for the cage match on this one as well. This was October of '83. But before that, he was battling with Wildfire Tommy Rich in some blood-soaked battles. Even the Masked Superstar himself would be bleeding through the mask on a few occasions, which is pretty cool. The Japanese have some cool pictures of that. I just couldn't find them. January of 1982, battling Tommy Rich. Great-looking magazine cover there. Here he is against Andre the Giant, August of 1982. Taking on Mr. Wrestling 2 in a mask feud. And of course, the battle in Georgia. Masked Superstar was a huge dude, big size. Him and Super D were an awesome tag team. That was Wild Bill Irwin under the mask, and always enjoyed watching those guys. All I have is squash matches from television. I wish I had some other matches, but usually they were not recorded or a single camera shoot, and the quality usually sucked. So I'm better off with just the TV appearances anyway. Masked Superstar, I always call him Masked Superstar. That's all I've ever known him as. Calling him Superstar just doesn't seem right because I'm so used to hearing Masked Superstar. Tito Santana together battling in '83. Superstar gets the credit. This is Super Destroyer on the cover, and this is not the Masked Superstar. They looked very much alike. Masked Destroyer had a giant star covering the whole side of his face. I don't have any pictures of that to show you, but that's him. He's partnered with the Masked Superstar here, taking on Andre and someone else in Georgia. I want to say Tony Atlas, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Here he is in the World Wrestling Federation with Blackjack Mulligan, April of 1984. Sergeant Slaughter taking on the Masked Superstar. Now, both in the AWA, moved on from the WWF and the '85 expansion, and these two guys were not part of the WWF's future picture, but great looking cover here with the red, the white, the blue, and the black for Sarge, who's helping build the newly expanded AWA. talking about the match from the AWA. This was AWA. I thought this was the match from the Garden, and it's not. This is an AWA match with Backlund and the Masked Superstar, and they had several. And it just happened to make it to the cover of Wrestling Scene, which makes sense because the photographers were not allowed at ringside to get this close of a shot in a WWF setting. So it kind of makes sense that it's an AWA show. And this is the retirement magazine from Japan, and this is one of the I had signed by the Masked Superstar. I have a couple other ones signed by him too. I just didn't pull them out. And this is where I found out the information about the name Superstar, and he wrote it right on his neck here. Cool looking shot of him as he retired, and it kind of goes into his retirement and the different masks that he had on. The earlier ones, like, I don't think there's any of them in here, but I'm not sure of the pages, and I'm already kind of running on a long time, so I don't want to go too far, but here he is, in a six-man tag team in Japan for New Japan, and it was a smaller setting, smaller show, but paying respect to the legend of the Masked Superstar in Japan and sending him out on a high note, and it's quite deservedly for sure. Of course, he went on to be Demolition and had a great career carrying that gimmick on for several more years and becoming a multiple-time tag team champion in WWF. So he had an extremely awesome run for a guy who came up from Georgia, held a few small regional titles, and making the big bucks in the WWF at the biggest time of the WWF, in that 85, 86, 87 time period there. Austin Idol is another one we're going to look at, who did not get a whole lot of love from the magazines, hardly at all. Here he is here on his first magazine cover in winter of 1980. He was, Mike McCord. He was Dennis McCord. He was chunkier and thicker. He had dark hair. He had a WWF run, and they liked him a lot. And he was destined for some things there as a heel, and said that he doesn't like the cold weather, and I'm out of here. And I gotta love and respect that, man. I mean, holy shit. Who walks away from a WWF deal because it's too cold? Me, for one, I would definitely leave. New York sucks in the winter. I hate it, and I've only got about 4 or 5 left, and I'll be leaving here myself. Here he is on the cover of Wrestling Superstars, his first cover. Also, Tommy Rich over here battling with Harley Race. Masked spoiler, it's the front cover, but we're looking over here at Michael P.S. Hayes, the beardless Michael Hayes, taking on Austin Idol here on his second cover. Early on, the Freebirds, Michael had no beard. Looked awful weird. I'm not used to looking at him like that. If you watch any old TV footage, Michael's clean shaven. Austin has another battle with Wrestling 2 on the cover of August of 80. So he got several small pages where they show his face, a couple of big photos on the covers, but they're not really showing him. This was quite possibly looking at the referee. This is the Mid-Atlantic territory. And it even says it right there, taking on Dusty Rhodes. So he had made his run up through the Crockett's, then back down to Georgia, and then, of course, back out to Memphis, and where he'd be a mainstay most of his career. His best cover on the cover of Sports Review with Ricky Steamboat, and probably Austin's best look, best appearance, best cover of all his magazines. He'd be here with Ray Stevens in a headlock in an annual summer of 82. Ray Stevens, you don't see many covers of. In the 60s, he was on quite a few, but him in the 80s was pretty rare, and he was like, an icon out in San Francisco, and Pat Patterson as well. And Austin's last magazine cover is the Wrestling News issue, actually Wrestling Review, owned by Wrestling News, just about a year or so before the magazine folded and became the wrestling only issue. They had a lot of name changes, very confusing shit. I'm about to do an upgraded version of the Wrestling News. There's just a lot of material to put together, so I'm going to try to break it down and make it a little more simple, but it's some very confusing publication there. Ole Anderson and Ivan Koloff, we're going to take a look at here. Ivan Koloff, also another hot wrestler in the Georgia territory, was there for a number of years, back and forth after winning the World Wrestling Federation title. He would have a tremendous career that really kind of goes under the shadows. He really, from the 60s and then dominating the WWF and Bruno in 1970, and moving up throughout the different territories in the Carolinas, becoming multiple-time champions everywhere he went. The guy should have been, a hell of a... I don't want to say this, but okay, for his honor, he should be recognized by the WWF and the Hall of Fame. I think your Hall of Fame's bullshit because there is no Hall of Fame. It's only in your head, and it's, doesn't recognize wrestlers for who they are. They recognize, I have my own opinion about the Hall of Fame. I have no respect for it. So to me, that's not a Hall of Fame. The real Hall of Fame is up north near Albany, and that's the real Hall of Fame to me. But he should be in there for at least his family's sake and his namesake, for absolutely sure. But last I heard, he wasn't. He might be now, for all I know. I really don't know. But Ivan Koloff in Georgia again with Ken Patera, April of 1983. Snook and Albano continuing their feud, taking on Paul Orndorff in Georgia on the cover of Main Event in May of 1983. Great cover of Ivan on the cover with Butch Reed, and got all four men signed on this great issue of July of 83. Up top a little bit here from the Mid-Atlantic territory was the battle with Steamboat Youngblood and Kernoodle and Sargent for the titles in Mid-Atlantic, and on the bottom, Ivan Koloff battling with Butch Reed in Georgia, and great looking shot of both these guys. This is like my first real first notice of Butch Reed. I'm like, who is this guy, man? And I tried to get everything I could to read up on him, hoping one day he would come to my territory. And well, when he did, it was certainly a letdown, and I wasn't even watching the territory anymore. Ivan continued on through the 80s after Georgia's closing, picked up in the Mid-Atlantic, and of course he had the tremendous run with Nikita and Khrushchev, and taking the titles several times for the tag teams, and the U.S. title for Nikita. Here he is battling Magnum TA. Guys, had a huge run, like I said, starting out in the 60s and still running up through the mid-80s, and he's still going as a top guy and covering magazine covers, which is a hell of an achievement at this point. 85 issue of Wrestling 85, Animal and Hawk, AWA champs, Ivan and Nikita, NWA champs, meeting at the Great American Bash, Crockett's biggest promotion show, besides Starrcade. Blood turns on blood. Nikita versus Ivan. Nikita turns good. Ivan continues to be the heel he always was. Another shot of him on the cover of Ringside with his uncle Ivan, battling Ronnie Garvin in the Mid-Atlantic near the Starrcade Bash time from 87. Ivan still staying relevant. Ivan taking on the Road Warriors here in late December of 1987. Like I said, still making the covers. What a great cover this is. Look, you see all the battle scars and rips across the forehead from the buckets of blood that he spilt throughout the years. And Bloodbath in Baltimore, Koloffs and Road Warriors are sissies, it said. And then here's your last cover with Ivan on it. This is 1988. And he's got his other nephew that came in and filled in for Nikita, and it didn't take off too good. And those two actually worked in ECW a little bit, and he helped establish some of the young ECW wrestlers like the Sandman early on before he would fully retire. And it's just an 8x10 that I got from Ivan when he was the tag team champions here. He had a tag team partner, and he also had a feud with the Iron Sheik in Georgia. This was a partnership formed in Georgia and melted also in Georgia, and they both would be ripping blood throughout the whole state of Georgia, May of 1981, with the Iron Sheik. Now, the Iron Sheik, while he was still partners with Ivan Koloff, were dominating the territory of Georgia and knocking everybody on their ass, and somebody had to come in and clean the town up and get rid of these two guys. Who's it going to be? The only two people who could possibly do it is the return of the Texas Outlaws, and that would be Dusty Rhodes and Dirty Dick Murdoch. And this is a double bull rope chain match. Ivan would be, chained to Dick Murdoch, and Dusty would have the bull roped with the Sheik. And it was a good bloody bout. No blood on the cover, but what a great cover, because I'm looking at this saying, where is this? What is this? And, how the fuck do I see this? Here's the Iron Sheik, here's Dusty, here's Murdoch. I'm not making the connection here because, I'm still at that point where TV hasn't been on cable and I'm only getting the news through the magazines. April 17th at the Omni, 1983, this iconic match took place, and it helped cause the split up between Ivan and the Sheik were together. Then they broke up and had a war, and then they got back together again, and then they had a war again. So it was on and off. So it's hard to determine at what stage they left off after this match. But Sheik would take the Georgia Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. Here he is with the Mid-Atlantic title in one of the Mid-Atlantic magazines there. Next up would be Sergeant Slaughter himself. Here he is in the Mid-Atlantic territory with the United States belt. Great looking shot of the Sarge. Before his WWF run, he'd have a Harley Race battle for the NWA championship and would hold the tag team titles multiple times as well. Here he is with Bruno Sammartino in April of 1981, and right around the time when Bruno was getting out of just finishing up the business and moving on before he'd make the comeback again in 86. Here is Sergeant again with Jack Briscoe. All again, like I said, it's all in the Mid-Atlantic territory at this point. But Sergeant had, just as many battles in Georgia as well. He's just not on any covers from Georgia, which, kind of sucks. Winter of '83 against Angelo Mosca. Here is the feud again from the Mid-Atlantic. The pre-match before the Starrcade '83 event. This was one big night. Kernoodle and Sergeant versus Steamboat and Youngblood. The night they captured the titles, we heard that the line was around the block and traffic was jammed up for miles trying to get tickets just to the show. And I know I got several of you out there who were experiencing this as it unfolded, and you've all shared your story with us on the comments. And feel free to comment some more and fill us in about this great time of those four battling it out. Sarge would make an appearance in the WWF, of course, as a bad guy, take a shot at Backlund's title, and would go back up from, he would turn face and he'd become the great G.I. Joe, and he's getting older and upper in his years now. Some of his best years are behind him. Gets released, goes up to the AWA and helps Vern Gagne build an establishment with fans in the Northeast, since Sargent was real hot at the point, and now the expansion brought the AWA to our televisions up here in the Northeast. Their first big show, Star Wars '85, and here's Slaughter on the cover of the big event that happens in the Meadowlands. Here is the coverage to all that. I'm sorry, Sarge was in a battle royal, which he won the battle royal. Here, all the coverage for that is in the June of '85's issue. Pro Wrestling USA invades the Meadowlands. Road Warriors here with Lawler. I believe this is Tommy Rich and Lawler versus the Road Warriors that were on the cover, that wrestling scene we looked at earlier. Also Martel taking on Jimmy Garvin. The next show for Pro Wrestling USA in the Northeast was April of 1985. This past one was February, so every 2 months they would skip and have another show, and Sarge would be taking on Kamala as the main line. This show wasn't as sold out as the Pro Wrestling USA show, the first one in February, but it was still pretty busy and very much a success, and that match makes the cover of the main event, wrestling in August of '85. And I believe this was summer of 1985. Slaughter, August, right in front of my face, taking on Ric Flair for the NWA World title. Sargent now was the America's champion, defeating Larry Zbyszko, and they would have a battle in the Northeast here in the Meadowlands, and several magazines picked up that match, and it was a pretty popular feud between him and Slaughter on the cover of Inside Wrestling, June of '85 also, and then the ringside issue of July, and here is Slaughter and Flair. Can't mention Georgia without mentioning a little bit of Ted DiBiase before he was the $1 Million Man. Big main component of Bill Watts' Mid-South Wrestling, but also in and out of Georgia from the 1980 period throughout 1984. He would be face, he would be heel, successful in either term. Ted DiBiase, young Ted DiBiase, August of 1981. Here he is as a heel of June of 84 with the claw, and that was his finishing hold as Bad Ted, and he would get some facial hair and become a little bit more rougher looking. He would be challenging Dusty Rhodes, and here's Dusty taking on in November of 1981 for the NWA short run that Dusty had. He would take on Flair, as Flair was world champion in 82. Also, Stan Hansen and Ole Anderson are the Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Champions, which would go on to be the World Tag Team Championships later on in the quote-unquote NWA territory when the territories were gone. He would have a battle with Ken Patera, September of 1981. Also in that same territory, Mid-Atlantic territory, Koloff battling with Paul Jones. Singles matches that made the magazine covers without any particular wrestlers, just having their feud on a cover from Georgia. We got the Great Kabuki and handsome Jimmy Valiant on the cover of Wrestling Scene, November 84. Good looking shot of both of them. Kabuki is not on many covers at all, just maybe 4 tops, and there were small pictures. He would partner up with the JYD. They would also work together in Memphis, and then also supposed to be in the Northeast, but then for the Pro Wrestling USA, but the JYD jumped ship and went to the WWF and skipped out on the joint venture of Pro Wrestling USA. December of 1983, Jimmy Valiant takes on the champ Harley Race for the title. Also the Samoans, the tag team champions there. Boogeyman on the cover of July 84's issue of PWI. Also a poster of Paul Ellering, his first poster in PWI when he was in Georgia. April of 81 also showed us the brand new and up-and-coming Bruno Sammartino Jr. And here's Bruno with his son David, going by Bruno Jr. at the time, and breaking his cherry in Georgia, on Georgia TV. And he was on there in some tag team matches where they would lose. Then he would sort of slowly come upon and build up a little bit and start winning a few matches. And then he was quickly out of the Georgia territory, moved on a little bit in other places, and then popped up just in time for WrestleMania 1 in the WWF. And here he is in 84. He'd have a little feud in Georgia with Larry Zbyszko, picking up the feud that his father once had right here in, like I said, summer annual of 84. Ole, Arn Anderson were not on very many magazine covers whatsoever, and their names are iconic throughout the wrestling world. Ole even owning part of the Georgia territory at one time and running things down there. He owned it, but he ran part of it. Jim Barnett sold it. Jim Barnett owned and sold more companies through the 60s, through the 80s than I can shake a stick at. All of them very successful. But Ole had a part of it. Jack Briscoe had a part of it. There was different, that's what led to some... Bill Watts was going to come in and take the TV time, and Gunkel got fucked out of her show, and it was a whole big mess. And I'm trying to leave all that out of it because it's just too much and too confusing. This 5-year span that I'm covering is confusing enough with some of the shit. You can imagine, the Gunkel mess. But here's Ole and Arn Anderson winning the National Tag Team Championship belts, and the Road Warriors once had held. And this would be the last look at the national belts, the national tag team belts for a while. Jim Crockett Promotions, I think, would merge this tag team belts into the Mid-Atlantic somehow with one of the other tag team belts, just like he did for all the other ones, like the Georgia belt, the Mid-Atlantic belt, the national belts, all kind of got merged into the Crockett's NWA. So they're still alive in lineage one way or the other. But this would be your last time you'd see the Georgia promotion on a magazine. Of course, Arn would continue on his career. He's still rather young in his career, and he would go on to be one of the Four Horsemen. Of course, Ole would too, but not so much. He'd be retiring, and the wrestling would, go to a completely different direction as the Georgia company sold to Crockett. Thank God he saved it. I didn't like the TBS station TV with Crockett. I was way more of a fan of the Georgia WCW rather than the Crockett WCW. I know it gets even more confusing trying to explain that, so I'm not even going to touch it. But I enjoyed Georgia with Gordon Soley when it was, the Barnett and Anderson years rather than the Crockett's territory. I don't mind Crockett's other shows. I just didn't like it. Just didn't click for me in that little small studio. I don't know why. It's just me. June of '87, and he's taken on the newly turned Nikita Koloff face. And Arn is a bloody mess on that cover. And the Rock and Roll Express, of course, him and his brother would be battling the Rock and Rolls throughout the Mid-Atlantic, and now which was called the NWA. Good shot of Arn, but not many magazines at all. We talked about Gordon being on the cover of a magazine, and of course, he's on the cover of a Japanese issue, and they're really hyping the match to take place in Georgia at the Omni. Ric Flair, NWA World Champion, Bob Backlund, WWF World Champion, title versus title. Let's get it together, settle the score once and for all. Who's the best wrestler in the world? Backlund, Flair. And they were the only ones to bring it to us. Hardly any mention or any hype about it. After the fact, our magazines covered it. But here's Bob Backlund on Georgia television with the WWF belt on TV. And let's just take a look inside at some of the color photos that we got in this issue. Here they are at the TV studio back when it was now orange. No longer they had the powder blue. And here they are in the ring at the Omni in '82. Champion and champion. Referee displaying both championship belts. Great looking shot there. Man, they really did a great job. I don't know why our magazines kind of didn't really do much. I mean, they did. It was only 4 or 5 different covers, but I'm surprised it wasn't, they could have made this, the biggest thing ever at a time when fans would have really bought into it, more so than the 70s version outside in Florida with Graham and Race. Pictures again, there's no film of it, so this is the closest you're going to see to any color action of these two guys. And then, of course, Dusty, partnering up with Harley to take on the Funks? Say it isn't so. I'm not sure where this is. Probably at the ending of an Amarillo show. Texas, here's Funk with his gun. Try that today. He'll have him arrested and everything else with the... but a great shot of the two champions on the cover with Gordon Soley. A great way to wrap up the Georgia Territory video, looking at one of the biggest matches to come out that was never talked about. And, of course, the magazines... Both Stanley Weston's and George Napolitano's companies covered that well. Wrestler 1982 and Wrestling Scenes 1982 of Georgia. So much history, so much to be mentioned that it's just too much to do for one video and damn near impossible. So I only covered 5 years of it. The 5 years that I thought would stand out the most for the guys in our age group, who was 45 to 65, according to the stats on YouTube. And so you guys can appreciate, take a look back at some fantastic TV, some fantastic wrestlers from a time that was long gone and still deeply loved today. All right, boys, we'll see you on the next.